As a nation, we are now burdened by a $4 trillion debt. The President and Congress are struggling to reduce it. Yet Special Assignment has uncovered a boondoggle run by the Pentagon that is soaking taxpayers all over the country. Mark Feldstein reports on grazing on the government.
They're grazing on the government. Cattle feeding on public land. And the government helps subsidize it, thanks to low grazing fees that federal auditors say cost taxpayers more than $50 million every year. But here in New Mexico, the cattle aren't the only ones grazing on the government. So are many ranchers. Their benefactor, the U.S. Army, thanks to an obscure government program that has cost taxpayers millions.
Well, it's a little under really nine something.
$9,000.
Yeah.
Jack Kane and his cousin Ben are two of nearly 100 New Mexico ranchers who get checks from the Army while feeding their cattle on government land.
I get $22,000.
Every year?
Every year.
The money is paid because these ranches border the Army's massive White Sands missile testing range. To avoid any missile damage, the Army created a special 3,000 square mile buffer zone. And every year, the ranchers who live there get paid, both a daily rate, in case they have to evacuate during a missile firing, plus a larger annual payment, regardless of whether any testing is actually done.
Do you think this program's good for the taxpayers?
I think so. They waste money in other areas that's a lot less important than this.
So far, this program has cost taxpayers more than $10 million. It began more than 30 years ago, during the Cold War, when White Sands was a crucial center for weapons testing. But the Cold War is over, and the number of missile tests there has gone way down. Today, improved technology has sharply reduced the chance of an accident. In fact, in the last 5 years, not a single missile has landed outside its range, the Army says, and no damage has been reported.
Many as 500 miles a day.
The Army's Jeff Gillen has been riding the range at White Sands for the past 5 years.
You ever seen any people get hurt out here during the missile tests?
No.
Any cattle ever get damaged?
No.
It's a program that's time usefulness is over with. I think it's time to get rid of it.
Ruth Baldwin has lived in and alongside the White Sands buffer zone for the past 10 years.
I really feel that the lease money is gravy.
Government gravy?
Yes.
Who pays for all this?
Oh, the taxpayers.
And the taxpayers are continuing to pay nearly $3 million since the Cold War ended.
It's a free enterprise system.
No question about it.
No question in my mind.
Oliver Lee got more than $15,000 last year under the Army program. In return, he had to leave his ranch during the only day of the year when the Army actually fired a missile nearby.
So what do you do with the cattle?
They just stay here.
And do what?
Do what they do every day, go out and eat grass and come to the wells and water.
The Army's director of range operations at White Sands is James Wise.
You gave one rancher more than $15,000 last year to leave his ranch just one time during the entire year for just 12 hours. Does that seem right?
It seems necessary.
That's more than $1,000 an hour.
Yes, but we couldn't forecast with accuracy that in 1992, that particular rancher would have to be evacuated only once. If we'd known that, we probably would have looked for different terms in the contract.
On another ranching operation, Southwest Grazing, the family of the late Commerce Secretary Malcolm Baldridge received more than $37,000. The Baldridge family declined to be interviewed on camera, but told us they earned their money and that the government program is fair. Their ranch, too, had to be evacuated just once during the entire year, for a total of 12 hours.
That's more than $3,000 an hour.
Yes.
How can I get you to pay me $3,000 an hour to leave my house a day a year?
You can acquire some of the property that is in these areas.
What do ranchers do when the Army asks them to evacuate the area?
We just change our day of shopping and we go do our shopping, you know.
Or maybe if we know ahead of time, we'll go ahead and make dental appointments, things like that.
Over the years, the payments to ranchers like the Caines have gone steadily up, but the number of missile tests has gone down.
Wouldn't it make more sense to just pay them for each time that you actually have to inconvenience them?
It might, and we should certainly look for alternative ways of achieving this capability at lower cost.
Why haven't you done this before?
Because we're still in a period of transition.
But one fundamental fact hasn't changed. The government currently owns most of the land that it's paying the ranchers to evacuate. The question, does it make sense for the government to pay for land that it already owns?
I think under these conditions it does, yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
I understand your position.
This is the most severe case of welfare ranching that I've ever heard of.
Environmentalist Jim Fish says New Mexico ranchers are actually being subsidized twice by taxpayers. First, by cheap grazing fees, then by the Army's annual payments. In many cases, the Army's check is actually larger than the grazing fees. Example, Ben Cain paid the federal government $13,000 last year for grazing rights, then received more than $22,000 from the Army.
They're not real cowboys. They're corporate cowboys. They're wheeling and dealing their public lands for private profit.
Ruth Baldwin says her rancher neighbors are under no illusions about what's going on.
I have even heard some of them that receive the money as referring to it as welfare.
They call it that themselves?
Yes, they do.
But other ranchers told us they deserve this money because of the inconvenience of living near the missile range.
We still think that it's been a good arrangement for the government. It's been a good arrangement for the taxpayer.
Has it been good for the ranchers?
It's been good for the ranchers too. There's no argument about that.
Some ranchers who have to evacuate several times a year say they should be paid even more by the government.
I think we could stand an increase. I think it's just like anything else. If the cost of living goes up that much, well, we're entitled to a little increase.
Ranchers aren't the only ones who have cashed in on the government program. So has the government itself. The C.A. Bar Ranch collected more than $17,000 last year in government gravy. Who owned it? The U.S. Department of Agriculture, which took over the bankrupt ranch. Yet that didn't stop the Army from sending out its annual check.
So the Army is paying the Agriculture Department, correct?
That's right, we received a check.
So the government is paying itself.
If that's the way you want to put it, I guess you're right.
Does that make any sense to you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Then there's the largest single recipient under the Army program, the Armendaris Ranch, outside the town of Truth or Consequences. Last year, the ranch collected nearly $50,000 from the Army to compensate for the disruption of its cattle business. There's just one problem.
How many head of cattle you got out here?
Right now, we don't have just a few. It's not in operation right now.
Not in operation?
Not at all. See, it's in bankrupt court right now.
The Armendaris Ranch has got no cattle.
So why are they collecting nearly $50,000 a year from the taxpayers? You're laughing.
I don't know. I have no idea. To me, it is bizarre.
Doesn't that seem like a waste of taxpayer money?
Yeah, it sure does. It really does.
Doesn't sound like a very good deal, Mr. Wise. Do you think it's a good deal, honestly?
It's certainly a good deal for the rancher.
What about for the taxpayer?
Under the terms that we have to negotiate, yes, it is. Because for every example that you can cite that appears to be questionable, there are probably several dozen that are perfectly legitimate.
Why should there be any questionable payments with taxpayer money?
I think that's the state of the economy right now.
Of course, the state of the economy right now includes a $4 trillion federal debt. It seems the Cold War has ended, except in the desert of New Mexico. Yet the Army checks keep coming, and the sacred cows keep grazing on the government.